$7,900,000, I think it was, for their cap space when it was $11 million. But you have to understand, Joe, they are projections. That is not the exact figure. And the media has a way of projecting things any way the media wants to do it. But nonetheless, the bottom line is the Chiefs do not have a whole lot of cap space with which to work, but they're better than 5 other teams who are above including the Buffalo Bills. They're above the salary cap. And that means they've got a lot of slicing to do.
Who else is above the salary cap? Do you remember?
I want to say that the Chargers were, I think, I've got to go back now and think about that. Chargers, I know who was at number 1 below it, and that's the Patriots. They have $126, I think it is, $1 million with which to work, and that's good because they can get well on that real quick. That's the objective of the salary cap. But nonetheless, the Chiefs will have a substantial barrier. I'm anxious to see what Kansas City and the other teams do as far as designating a franchise player. They may not designate anybody. They have some people there who they need to keep, like Nick Bolton and perhaps a Trey Smith, people of that caliber. But to really assure that they'll be on the team, they've got to be a franchise player, and that's very expensive in its own right. So March the 4th is the deadline. You have to designate your franchise player if you're going to have one by March 4th.
Now, I'm also seeing stories that Travis Kelce, a answer from him, may not be forthcoming anytime in the near future.
He said when he was mulling over, interestingly enough, at the end of the Super Bowl, I'll be back, and then how quickly that changed. Well, he has to assess his own physical well-being. He's not a kid. He's, 35 years old. He's taken his share of beatings in there. He's not only a receiver, he's a pretty good blocker, or was a pretty good blocker at the tight end position. And he has some, how can you term this, alien forces who are probably suggesting what he should do and what he shouldn't do.
Outside influences.
But I have a feeling he's going to retire.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
What gives you that idea? What makes
the fact that he wavered right after having made a claim that he was going to be back? I'll be back. And then within 24, 48 hours, I'm going to have to think about this. And it's going to take a lot of thinking because he has to assess his physical well-being. He has to assess his monetary, which I don't think is really a problem at all, and what he is going to do if he does retire, what he's going to do in retired status. It does take some planning.
Now, the Chiefs did sign another tight end on just about a week ago, a guy by the name of Anthony Fursker. Or you can tell me, is that right? Do you know?
I want to. It's close. It's close enough. I don't know. I'm not
sure how to say that. Sorry, Anthony, if you're listening out there. But he was signed by the Chiefs to kind of add to that stable of tight ends that they have that includes Noah Gray and Jody Fortson. Read anything into that or not, or just them trying to protect themselves?
I would say it's just this is the time to pick up guys you might like, and you can always add, you can always cut guys like this later if that doesn't make the cut. The Chiefs are going to end up losing some bodies, so if you've got a guy you got your eyes on, why not go for it? I don't think this would pertain to Travis Kelce. I don't think they're going to make any particular moves to replace him unless they know for a fact. I would say that they probably feel pretty good with Noah Gray filling the role at this point, but you're not going to plug and play a Travis Kelce. That's just, he's too good. He's an all-timer at this point at what he's done in the NFL. So you're not looking to replace that. You're just looking to see how the team look. You're more looking to see what the team looks like without him, and it's going to be your Xavier Worthy's. And when he comes back, barring a potential suspension, we haven't heard about in a while, Rashee Rice. Those are going to be what they're looking at. But, yeah, I'll be curious to see what he does because if he wavers a bit after the Super Bowl, nobody wants to go out like that. That's not how anyone wants their career to end. But you've also seen guys push it until the tires fall off, effectively, and most of them would say after that they probably wish they had stepped away a little sooner. So It is better in the long run to step away than be forced away, and that's probably what the biggest way in his mind is right now.
What do you think, Josh?
I think he's going to retire. He's got nothing to prove. He's a Hall of Famer. He's set all kinds of records. Yeah, they didn't get the three-peat in the Super Bowl, but they were there. They were the first team to have that opportunity to three-peat. So I think the wear and tear is one factor, like Ned has said, but I think all the external things that he's starting to do and setting up are going to pull him away. I mean, this podcast with his brother, I know he's going to love doing that. And they got paid $100 million for their podcast. So money is not a factor in any of this. It's the wear and tear on his body and how much more he thinks he can take. So I will be surprised if he does come back, honestly. Because if I was in his situation, I'd be out.
Yeah. There was an article posted on ESPN. I'm staring kind of at the headline right now about cutting Travis Kelce. That was a suggestion. A bold move is this story.
Well, it is a possibility. The Chiefs do not want... they paid the price for this back in 1970 when Hank Stram stayed with all the old-timers, and they faltered almost immediately. Well, you don't want that to happen, and it is a business. You've got to understand that. Sure, there's a loyalty to key players like a Kelce and people of that caliber, but by the same token, do you sacrifice a team's future success on what is publicly thought of to be the great move? And it might not be. They make the judgment on this. And it's the front office.
It's like you said, it is a business, and also if Tom Brady can leave New England, if Peyton Manning can leave Indianapolis, if things like that can happen with the future in mind, Travis Kelce could certainly be. If he comes back and says, "I want to play," and Kansas City says, "We want you to play for a lot less money," and he says, "I don't want to do that," it's possible. It could save them potential money against the cap to go add more depth for a player who, admittedly, while he's still, the fact that he is Travis Kelce carries weight, and I think he could still show up for you in big moments. He didn't look like the capital T, capital K Travis Kelce this year. It looked like it was maybe starting to take a toll on him. And
I agree.
And it happens fast to players. They can go from top of their craft one year to the next year. All of a sudden, that missing half step is the difference that drops them a whole other level of play.
Yeah, ask Aaron Rodgers about that.
I watched the Steelers in the late 2000s, or in the early 2010s, hang on as that defense got older and older to try, and all of a sudden it's like, why is our defense so bad? We still have all these guys. It's like, because they're all
in their 30s,
just a little slower than they used to be, and it just doesn't have the same impact.
I think the big thing about Travis Kelce this season was he just wasn't. It's hard to say whether it was him or some other factor. He just wasn't consistent. There were some games, I think a couple of the playoff games, where it was like, this is Travis Kelce. He was always open. And Patrick Mahomes was always finding him, and, it looked like the same old thing. You ask yourself the same question, why is that guy, of all guys, open on the field? But there were times when he just didn't seem like he was part of the game plan, or maybe he wasn't getting open. It was hard to say what was going on with him this season. But it's hard to imagine him playing for somebody else at this point.
Well, that is exactly the nature of professional sports as well, and we've talked about that before. With the free agency in Major League Baseball, with the salary cap in football, you do see a circumstance in which you're, at one time, focused attention was on your favorite players. They aren't there anymore because of free agency, because of all the other ramifications that have come about by federal court rulings and so forth and so on. So it isn't the same. And I'm of the opinion that that's going to backlash on not just baseball, but all of pro sports when you lose your fan identification. Case in point, guys, and I'm sure you all saw this, ESPN has pulled out of their Sunday agreement with Major League Baseball at the end of this season.
Oh, I didn't know that.
That's a long-going contract that they have. They're responsible for the Sunday night games. Ain't going to happen. Now, Major League Baseball, we're sorry to see ESPN go, but we have some others. I'm not sure they do. ESPN is pulling out because Major League Baseball wanted too much money for their rights, and they have other priorities. Well, we're talking baseball. That's going to happen, in my opinion, to some of the other sports as well, where they price themselves right out of the market. And who picks them up? Well, eventually they get picked up by somebody. But the days of the big money may be just starting to end.
Well, let me ask you this question. This is completely off the conversation that I was wanting to start the show with, but we're here, so let's do this. Also, too, do you not feel a little bit like ESPN has lost some of its cachet?
Well,
it's not what it was.
Joe, they have to, because anytime you have a long-term organization that's had big success, it inevitably is going to come down. That's the way human nature is. It's the way any industry is. Yeah, they probably have a little bit, changing personnel, taking, God bless me, Chris Berman off there. He was their signature guy. They've had others on there who have been focal points. Well, it's really tough when you do that to bring in somebody equal caliber. They don't exist. That person has to establish his or her own persona on the air. So, yeah, I do think they have lost a little bit, but not enough to really fracture them as the sports leader, because they're doing what all of us when we were young would have loved to have seen on TV. All sports, all day long, all night long, and so forth. They have done it, and they had the money to get it done. But in terms of their popularity now, it's probably down a little bit.
Well, too, they've also gone to this programming where it's a full day of talking heads. I mean, they don't have sports all day, all long. It's just talk about sports all day, all long. And there are less and less actual sports programming on that network these days.
Well, that is true, and their methodology here is probably accurate, because you're talking about a singular subject. This was pointed out to me in my early days at KY3 when I was there, and I was, hey, we've got to have more sports on the air. Come here, Mr. Reynolds. Take a look at our demographics here. And they showed the demographics, and sports really occupied at a very strong level with the overall audience of just a fraction over 20%. I said, well, and they said, that's a minority. Yeah, but my argument was, that's a vocal minority, and 20% is pretty good. You lose that from your audience, you're going to lose a lot of buying power. Right. Well, they didn't view it that way, nor do the major networks. You have to understand there is a limited appeal in the overall population. Now, everybody falls into the Super Bowl time or World Series time or whatever. You're a sports fan. But most of them are casual. They are not regimented literally directly as part of your lifestyle. That's a vast minority.
Well, let me ask you guys this, and I mean, I guess we're kind of already started our conversation about, Alec took a sports break, and I understand that. I've taken a sports break myself from things. Do you think that sports play as big a role in our life now as they used to?
It's, they take a different shape, because you talk about, if ESPN's losing cachet, things, and it's just not like it used to be. There's a line you have to look at of, for me, like, it's not what it used to be, but everybody thinks how it used to be is better than how it is now. What it used to be for Ned versus what it used to be for Josh and Joe versus what it used to be for me all look different, and we all think that version of it is better than what it is now.
Right.
You damn kids, we had it.
We're back in my day, and and I am still in the big picture. I'm a young man, but I'm already starting to see the impact of in my day, because
Ben Roethlisberger
back
that pigskin around
back in the wee years of 2011, but it was but it these things change with the modern audiences, and even in my lifetime, the change that social media has brought. What are they're looking for things to clip, to put out there on your Twitters, on your Facebooks, on your Instagrams, because the
TikToks,
the amount of attention that you have from your audience is smaller now. They want the same amount of information bite-sized, so they're condensing it. So, and not to mention, you have shows like First Take that was just nothing but two men screaming at each other with opposing opinions, and it caught fire. And now that's, like you said, Joe, it's talking heads all day long, because they have to see that's what people, I guess, want to see, even if that's not what, now on a grand scale.
It's a lot cheaper, and you end up elevating people to this kind of status. You're right. There's some of those shows. First of all, I was a huge fan of Pardon the Interruption. I like Tony Kornheiser. I like Michael Wilbon. I like their take on sports. I didn't always like either one of them, but I grew to like both of them. But the problem is, it's the same problem that ESPN has had with its anchors since the days of Keith Olbermann and
Dan Patrick
and
Chris Berman.
You can't find two guys that were that smart, that quick, that knew that much about sports, and put them on the air and get the same thing, or not even guys, but people.
Yeah.
And they've tried to, and you see it all through broadcasting. You see it all through everything, where we've tried to force personality in people who are not necessarily ready for it. So
Well, that's definitely true.
And
What do you think?
they try and find personality, and they force conflict. You can tell there are. I remember reading a story once of it was a broadcaster who was in the early stages, and he did a piece where they filmed it where they both agreed. And they called cut, and they kind of made a gesture to the other guy, and like, let's run it again. And then the other guy changed his stance entirely and gave the opposite side.
Well, we talked about that last week, too, because Ned was talking about the article that was written that said, is the Chiefs dynasty crumbling? And I said, I guarantee you that guy has the same article that says, greatest dynasty ever going strong.
Ready to
If they had
publish
won,
whichever
yeah.
team won. Yeah, and Go ahead, Josh.
Oh, no, I was just yeah, we did talk about that, because if the Chiefs had won, the article would have been, is this the best dynasty ever?
And the thing about the Chiefs as a dynasty is, and as I read it somewhere placed, they are thieves of joy for everybody else.
Right.
The people don't want to see them win because that means your team is not winning. And whenever they do take a topple like they did in the Super Bowl, everybody is so quick to pounce and be like, they were bad for one game, ergo they're going to be bad next year.
Forever,
Come on. Really? I was like, it is rare to see a team have this run of dominance go from one game to the next and it's over. That's almost certainly not what's going to happen. But people, and it's the problem with sports talk as it is now. What gets sound bites? Hard and hot takes.
Right.
And what's a hot take?
Controversy.
What's a hot take? Saying
Cut
the Chiefs
Travis
are
Kelce.
Cut
Yeah.
Travis
Cut
Kelce.
Travis
The
Kelce.
Chiefs are dead and they're never coming back. Patrick Mahomes overrated, and it's just
Right.
going to flood the headlines.
Which
Let me-
is so stupid.
Let me ask you this, Josh, and Ed, I'm sure you want to chime in on this. Do you think sometimes organizations get forced into making decisions by these popular, hard takes, as Alec puts it, that, hey, let's trade Matthew Stafford. Let's get him out on the block.
I think they would tell you they don't, but they do. It's inevitable, because it's all. I think when you factor in money, the money that they're generating from the result of these hot takes and sound bites, because it's all selling advertising, right?
Yeah.
That will influence their decision making for their team. It shouldn't, but I guarantee you it does.
Josh, you're 100% correct. When these networks get together, and they do have mutual meetings, they allege that they're in rivalry, and they are to some extent with programming and so forth and so on, but they also there's a little collusion involved.
Oh, yeah.
And when they take a look at certain ratings levels, if you have a controversial show on of some sort, and it has gangbusters ratings, hey, you need to change that. Oh, no, they're not either. If they're bringing in the people and bringing in the money, it will sell. And that's what you want. Now, I'm going to give you an example of the Super Bowl. This year's Super Bowl game, the prices came down. The ticket prices, number one, were I think $8,200 or $8,300, which is still a hell of a lot of money to pay for a
crazy.
Super Bowl. But the TV money was down a little bit. Why? Because, well, the matchup I thought was attractive. I thought Chiefs-Eagles was a terrific matchup, but not everybody in the country identifies with that. They want the coast team, the Rams, Chargers.
Yeah, well, but you also spoke to that before the Super Bowl. You said that poll that they did, 68% of the NFL fandom that was polled wanted the Chiefs to lose because they were tired of them winning.
Bingo. That's exactly
and
it.
another rematch.
Yeah, and it was a
when you look
rematch
at the
of
last 5-6 years, we have 2 Chiefs Niners and 2 Chiefs Eagles, and then a Chiefs Tampa Bay thrown in there for good measure. So people are tired of watching that same product. It happens quick.
Right.
You look at Golden State was a scrappy upstart basketball team with very little success, and then all of a sudden Kevin Durant comes over. They rip off 3 titles in 4 years, and they're the least popular, most hated team in the NBA. It happens quick. People want to see different things. That's why the NFL salary cap tries to make parity such a big deal, because they
That's
know.
exactly right. The salary cap is there for a reason. It's to prevent dynasties from happening. The same with the NFL draft, where the best team in the league gets dead. And the expression is DAL. I'm not going to tell you what the A is, but they're
Right.
dead. They're dead last, and they're there for a reason, because the NFL and the other leagues want a parity level about what they play. Now in baseball, you do get that, But the consistency is what's going to win. Consistent championship teams that have good leadership and so forth and so on. There are going to be, a few clinks in the Army armor, I should say, so to speak. But the fact of the matter remains that that's what the leagues want and probably what they're going to get. Now, here's the one that's classic in my opinion. We have always railed, and it's been on this show, railed about the all-star games. Now, baseball's probably the one that has the most realism to it. But the NBA and the NFL and the NHL are absolute rubbish. They don't mean a thing. And they're engineered not to mean a thing. So what happens? The National Hockey League says, we're going to do something different here.
Yeah.
We're going to have a four-nations face-off. How many watch that championship game?
Yeah.
The three hands went up.
Three out of four. Three out of four in this
That was
studio.
a visual vote for the audio format we're presenting to, but three hands went up.
Well, ass was the word you were looking for a minute ago, Ned, that you didn't want to say.
It was. It's known as we're finishing DAL. What's that mean? Dead ass last. Is
You hope you got that on tape. Ned setting ass. We'll
Nah,
come back
you
in
said it. You
we'll
said
come
it.
back in a moment and we'll do some more talk on all this stuff. It's Ned Talk.
You're listening to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave, a proud member of the Chiefs Radio Network. Back to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave, a proud member of the Chiefs Radio Network.
Here we are together. We are Joe Westen, Ned Reynolds, Alex Scott, Josh Roberts, and we are discussing the changing landscape of sports. That was not really what I planned on talking about today, but it's always a good conversation.
What was your concept?
Well, I thought we'd talk about what the Chiefs are going to do, and then I thought in the second part we'd probably talk a little bit about Alec and his sports break, and then I thought we'd talk about baseball and then wrap up the show.
Can I talk about
who's
one
better between MJ and
facet of the sports world that really does disturb me that I saw last night, and I'm being very serious about this. When I saw the note that a player had been kicked off the team and two more suspended from the Fresno State basketball team, which is being investigated for gambling.
Ooh.
And I hate that. Absolutely hate it.
But that's part of that's all goes into this conversation because we talked about, you mentioned to the All-Star games being kind of garbage, and that the NHL went to this really nice idea, and they got a lot of press on it, a lot of stories.
It was amazing hockey. They had exceptional games, and and the biggest thing you can say is it's just player buy-in, and that's what made it so good. The NBAs, and when it was just an all-star game for the NHL, it's like the players just they're not trying, and it's because they don't want to hurt their bodies. And the NHL guys really came out and put it out there for their country and for us fans and gave a really great product. Now, I'll be curious to see the form it takes going forward, because even in this game, Matthew Tkachuk for the Florida Panthers sustained a bit of an injury and didn't play a lot in that final matchup.
Right.
If he has a lingering issue going down the stretch, how do you think his team, the Florida Panthers, are going to feel about it?
And, Alec, that's very good that you brought that up. It certainly won't be next year because the Olympics is next year, and that takes the place. There is no need for an all-star game. The following year, they're bringing in something called a World Cup. And that is, I think that's all nations involved in it, and they can utilize a 2-week period for that to happen. Then the next year after that, I think they bring back probably the 4 nations or 5 nations. It's Russia that wasn't included this year, and they should have been in there. And then you're right back to the Olympics again. So it can alternate every year. I would like for the NBA to do something like that, have national players. Of course, it would mimic the Olympics, but that's exactly what they're doing here, having an international team, your own personnel, the Americans against the Europeans, or maybe the Asians who are really coming on in basketball. And I just use that as an example. And the Canadians are very good at basketball as well. So you could have something of that format going in, and I really think it would stimulate the audience response to a terrific extent. And right now, that doesn't exist.
next year's World Baseball Classic too.
It is. That's
and
right.
And that one always, and there's something about putting it on for the country. The players aren't going to get on a national stage repping their country's name on the jersey and not try. Meanwhile, in the NBA All-Star Game, if it just says East West or Shaq versus Charles Barkley, they know this is just an exhibition. Who cares? And there's not an amount of money you can offer these players to make them try either. They make too much.
The World Baseball Classic, which Joe just mentioned. How many of you remember the last game, the championship game that they played, Japan versus the USA, and you had Shohei Ohtani against Mike Trout, two teammates facing each other for the.
Imagine if they were on the same team, how good that could have been. Can you just imagine? We'll never know.
The example that all of those sports could look at is soccer if they want, because international soccer, they play all kinds of They have their own leagues. You know, the Premier League is the biggest one, the most well represented in media and everything. But they all have their own leagues, and then throughout the season they play international games. There's the Champions League tournament is based on the winners of all those other European leagues, and so it's a European tournament that brings all these other European clubs together to play against each other. They have an FA Cup, which is an international one. So they spread that out throughout the season to where there's always an interesting tournament going on besides just their regular season tournament. And so I think that's the NHL has caught on with that, and it makes perfect sense because it's such an international sport. Basketball needs to catch on with
it. They won, but I don't think anybody really cares about it. They do have an NBA mid-season tournament or early season tournament.
Yeah, but again, that's the teams vying against each other, and really,
it wasn't.
It's not. There's no identification with it as such. Boy, have we ever gotten away from my original suggestion about the gambling? My goodness.
Well, I mean, it's. I guess this is all part of. It's all. Yeah, I mean, well, it is. It's all part of it. It's the how much media attention we have, period, across the board.
Oh, sure.
It's not like we have what we used to have, where we had, each town had its own major newspaper or two or three newspapers, and you bought that newspaper based on the slant that they went. The same with TV. You watched KY3 or Color 10 because of the slant that they took.
Yeah.
And then there's just so much media. There's so many things you click on. And it's like I look at an article that somebody wrote, and they wrote a paragraph, and they got paid for it. They got paid however much money to write a paragraph, and they made me look at it with all these advertisings around it. So I guess that's really what they want. But there's also all these other people fighting for sports just to get it. I mean, the demand is still there to a certain extent. I mean, I get that ESPN's going, well, that's too much money. I'll bet you TNT picks that up.
Somebody probably will, but I think the prices will have to be adjusted. And the reason I brought it up is not so much that I favor ESPN or anything like that. It is the fact that they came right out and said it's too much money. I think it may be a sign of the times. That's what I was trying to point out. Now, I don't mean next year or the year after that, but over the next 5 to 10 years, I wouldn't be at all surprised to see a reduction in the amount of rights fees.
Well, we're talking about broadcasting and all that is that, ESPN, all the networks that have carried Monday Night Football have struggled to find the lightning in the bottle that they had with the very original Monday Night Football. Mm-hmm. They have struggled on ESPN to make that Sunday night game back into what it once was, because I can remember a time when everybody watched that game. Sunday Night Baseball, didn't matter who it was going to be a great matchup. And, people watched that game. Maybe you didn't care for maybe you didn't care for, I forget what he's, John
Kruk?
Not John Kruk, but John, I want to say John Sterling, but that's not right.
Well, the announcer you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, the San Francisco Giants announcer, yeah. Uh-huh.
And Joe Morgan. I know a lot of people didn't care for Joe Morgan.
Joe Morgan, another one, right.
But people watched that game, and they've had trouble filling that slot with people that are engaging to watch that game with. A lot of times it just ends up being three people. Imagine us with sports going on in the background that you could watch.
Right.
And that's what it's really turned into. And it's like the game is now superfluous to what the people are doing talking on the air.
You make a very good point. Your hosts on a lot of these events is a very important aspect and is sometimes overlooked because you have a vision. We're talking TV here. You have a visual image of what's going on, so the announcers don't make any difference. Aha, but they do. And if it's done the right way and developed into a discussion as opposed to, he just scored that basket right there. Well, hell, I just saw that. Thank you. No, you've got to have somebody who has a talent toward working with others and letting your expert do the one who does all the analysis.
But striking the balance is difficult, too, I think, for most of these people, because you see, a lot of what's going on in the game. What actually just happened in the game, because they're talking, let's go down to the field and let's talk to right. Let's talk to Andy Reid and see what he's thinking right now, and the game becomes second tier to the personalities that are on. And it's really hard to strike that balance. I think it's been hard to find people to fit the bill to do that. And getting back to your original point, again, part of this whole changing sports landscape is now gambling is virtually legal, and it's becoming more prevalent, and I think you're going to see it very badly in college athletics.
I hope not, because I did live through the previous scandals back in 1950 when colleges like CCNY and NYU, they were forced to drop their programs to the point where they're not even relevant anymore. Heck, NYU was a really, really big deal, and out they went. Kentucky even canceled their season in 1951 because of their alleged association. It does, and I'm a fan of the gambling. I think it promotes a lot of sociological interest in the games and so forth because you're available for a monetary reward. But this ugliness of players being involved in it and perhaps shaving points and so forth and so on is...
So the question I would ask in relation to that is, do you think that they opened up the gambling too soon without putting more structure into it for specifically college athletics?
Well, I think the structure has to come with what you learn from what has happened. Now, they knew that circumstances like that might exist, but do the feds and the local institutions who are directed to follow this and make sure they exist? That part of it I don't know, but I do know that you can't have this. How many games are going to happen where there's a strange call of some sort at the end, and that's a fix or something like that?
Well, too, we live in a day and age with fantasy sports and with the way that sports betting is set up. I mean, it used to be that you bet, on the team and on the spread. Mm-hmm. That's the way that you bet. Now, there are so many different ways to bet. Oh, yeah. The people are typically more interested in how an individual does. That's easy for me to say. An individual does rather than how the team does.
I'm betting on heads. Nope, it's tails. You lost.
Coin toss, Gatorade color.
That used to be a joke that you could go to the Tropicana in Vegas and bet on the coin toss.
Now, when we come back, we'll continue this conversation. It is Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave.
You're listening to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave, a proud member of the Chiefs Radio Network. Back to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave, a proud member of the Chiefs Radio Network.
Renaming the show Two Old Guys, One Middle-Aged Guy, and a Young Guy, complaining about how sports is changing. My big complaint for the week is the Yankees have done away with their long-time facial hair policy, which I've always been a big fan of. I have facial hair, but I love that Yankees players didn't look like they just rolled out of bed. And I sound old. Like, I've had long hair. I've had long beards. I'm a big believer in changing your revolution starts at home in the Matthew Mirror. I'm a big believer in that. But I always liked that the Yankees were different than other teams. They don't have, Johnny Damon had to shave all that crap off when he came over to the Yankees.
Well, hey, it's, the Cardinals had a manager who was let go because of that, because of his demands for tonsorial and sartorial splendor with the team. Everybody must look alike and shave, and guy got canned. I don't remember what his name was, but back in the about the late 70s, and the players went back to what they wanted to do and developed into winners after that.
You know, when I coached, I had the kids had to wear the uniform a certain way, and the reason why is I always said, look good, feel good.
Play good.
Feel good, play good.
Yeah.
Play good, pay good.
And it just made
Did
it
you
just
make them wear it right side out instead of inside out? Is that
No,
the requirement?
It was just a big thing. But I had kids that were resistant to that. We had one kid who refused to wear a hat, and we would make him wear his hat out to the field, and then he would take it off when he got to the field, and he would set it next to him in the grass.
Interesting.
Fight them back. He's sticking it to the man.
Yeah, that's right. He showed me. Really showed me. But I mean, the times are changing. I mean, things are. I think things happen at a more noticeable speed now than they did when I was younger, or Ned, when you were younger. The change in the game and the way it's presented in all the games. I mean, for gosh sake, there's a pickleball channel now. I mean, not only is it a great sport for older people to play, they can now watch it too. I mean, it's just amazing how all this stuff changes.
It is. Again, it's American society. It's world society as far as that's concerned, and it is in a constant state of flux. We didn't realize it when we were kids. And when there was no watching the pro sports, your baseball players, you always knew that your favorite player was going to come back to the team, and the same with football and same with basketball. You had your favorite players on there. Well, that doesn't necessarily exist anymore.
Yeah,
and
Kurt Flood.
Yeah, Kurt Flood. Kurt Flood did it. Exactly. The reserve clause when it's smashed into smithereens by the courts and so forth and so on. And now look what you have. You have changing teams, and now it's trickled down to college sports where you have changing teams every year. Is that good? It is not, in my opinion. Not at all. I don't decry the guys making money. Don't decry that at all. But to be able to pick up and leave and play for another team because you think you're going to get more playing time, number one, that's faulty psychology.
Right.
But number two, it really destroys any kind of identification that the audience has with your team. And I think we're seeing that here in town.
Well, what it also develops is a lack of loyalty. You're not loyal to the team that recruited you and signed you to play for them, because you're not getting enough playing time. So you're going to go somewhere else and hope that you get more playing time.
Exactly.
I don't like that at all, and I think that leads to what you were talking about earlier about the gambling. I think when there's no loyalty to that team, then you're out for yourself. They're all a bunch of lone wolves that are trying to make their extra money doing whatever. And so shaving points in basketball is a good way to make an extra paycheck.
To push back on that a little bit, I do think in the defense of some of the players nowadays, it's always been an option for a coach who recruits these kids to say, I'm going to coach you up, we're going to do the right thing, and then all of a sudden they get a bigger money offer and they can bounce.
And they're out of there.
And no consequences. So, I understand that it is. I think there's been more unintended consequences than we foresaw, and I think there's some that needs to maybe be addressed with the transfer portal issue. But I do think it's always been an option for coaches to bounce whenever there's greener pastures, and the players have always just had to gut it out with extreme consequences. And we don't know what promises maybe got made to these players, and who's to say they're not putting in the hard work, and whether it's just they're not developing, or maybe something didn't play out right. But with the way the system is drawn up now, I can't fault the athlete for seeking a better option if they can go get it.
No, nor do I. And if there's going to be a pretty good payday involved, a nil, hey, that's fine. But you have to honor a commitment that you have made. And nothing wrong with the portal if you sit out for a year. I mean, after all, going from one team to another right away, that it lends itself to a total imbalance in the world of athletics, and that is not exactly what they want at all, nor do we want.
No, and the most extreme case I can think of for going into this year is Georgia quarterback Carson Beck, who was projected to be a top draft pick, has a bad year, gets hurt, Georgia gets bounced without him playing. That guy's got to change his image, and fast. So
isn't he going to Florida?
Miami. So he leaves Georgia to go play for another good school to try and rewrite his image. Now, again, within the confines of where the rules are now, I don't blame him. His draft stock plummeted, and he needs to fix that. So he's doing what he can to fix it. Is that good for the product of the sport? Not especially, but it's good for the individual.
Who do you suppose Miami opens up with this year in football?
Georgia?
Notre Dame.
Oh.
Well, that's a good test right out of the gate.
It will
Was
be.
he not going to be the starting quarterback for Georgia if he came back with them?
That I don't know.
I think there was another guy in camp who had superseded him, and the fact that Georgia did not have, by Georgia standards, a real good year.
Right.
Whomever replaced him sure didn't look as good as Beck did at times, but Beck was throwing interceptions left and right. So it wasn't the year he wanted. He's trying to put that behind him and a new stool.
Well, you look at that. I mean, the model now though is Jalen Hurts, because he played for Alabama, got benched, and then goes out. Didn't complain. I mean, he's a class act. I'm not railing on him in any way, shape, or form. Then he goes to Oklahoma and has a really good year with Oklahoma, and so kids see that. The guy's Super Bowl champion now, Super Bowl MVP.
Yeah.
Same thing can be said for me. I can go from whatever program I want to do. But the problem is, and you see it trickle its way down, or maybe even bubble its way up in this case, because I saw it coaching sports as kids and parents were always looking to move to another organization or team that they felt fit their status better. And that was hard to watch. Mm-hmm. That was really hard to watch. But again, it's the changing landscape of sports and how all of this is changing. It's not the same as the days when the baseball players left their gloves on the field. I mean, it's just not the same.
No, it is not. And that's one of the chief, I think, argumentative points about the future success of sports is the identification level. But it will be adjudicated in some particular aspect. Now, how, I don't know.
Right.
Because I'm an old man, and old people don't make decisions anymore.
Well, the one thing,
I think you're wrong about that.
the one thing that I wonder that still seems to be so up in the air is how thin is everything going to be spread with all of the avenues where you can watch sports? Because now that you can watch it on Netflix, and you can watch it on Amazon Prime, you can watch it on Peacock and everything, and that's all a money thing. It's all they want their piece of the pie, and I get it. At what point are people going to say, "Well, I've lost interest because I can't watch my favorite team unless I subscribe to this subscription service, and I'm tired of doing that, so I just won't watch."
And Josh,
I mean, is there a tipping point?
Yes, there is, and it's when people quit watching.
Yeah,
That's
my fear.
When they don't pay the money, and and right now streaming is your big deal. When the Hulus and the whatever some of the others are that they have. When they begin to say, well, nobody's watching, we can't afford to have this.
Right.
That's when you see a lessening of, number one, the price tag, and a lessening of the venues that cover it.
Well, it's hard for me to pay the amount of money that I usually pay per season to watch the Yankees play, because there's a lot of teams I don't want to see play.
Right.
I want to see that team play. I want an a la carte menu that says I can see that team play, and I don't care about the Padres. I don't care about the Blue Jays. I want to see the Yankees play. I mean, we live in a Cardinals area. We live in a Royals area. But for fans who are fans of teams outside of that area, it becomes difficult.
You just named it right there, the a la carte method. That's what it will go down to. Josh wants to watch whatever your team is.
Yeah,
I want to watch Alabama. Well, let's see here. There's the Alabama app.
Alabama.
Well,
we'll push that right there, the Alabama app, and you get Alabama and Mercer. Hey, that'll be very good.
That'll be a great game to watch.
Who wants to come over to watch Alabama versus Mercer?
Hey, who's coming over to watch McCook Barber College?
All right. When we come back, we'll tell you what we're going to watch or not watch on TV this afternoon on Ned Talk.
You're listening to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave, a proud member of the Chiefs Radio Network. Back to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave, a proud member of the Chiefs Radio Network.
Yep, we are member of the Chiefs Radio Network, and we are Ned Talk, your local live sports talk show. Really interesting conversation today, guys.
Yeah, this has been great.
Didn't really talk about anything too terribly specific about the Cardinals, the Royals, the Chiefs, but we did talk. We had a good conversation.
Cardinals didn't do anything particularly specific this whole offseason.
You know, it's been my contention. I was thinking that the one reason why the Yankees went to the facial hair policy was Arenado.
Get him?
Because they thought if they
It's
changed
me.
that.
I can finally be a Yankee.
Yeah.
With my beard.
Me too.
Well, here's one of your questions. Will Arenado be a Cardinal by July the 30th?
Will he be a Cardinal by the end of spring training?
Oh, I think by the end of spring training.
Well,
he will be, yeah.
that deal was on the table to go to Houston. He would not waive his no trade for Houston, though. So, and
they're a bunch of cheaters.
Banging trash cans scare Nolan Arenado.
I'm not so sure that now he says when he went to camp, and more power to him, he said, I'm a Cardinal, I'm wearing the Cardinals uniform, I will play for the Cardinals, I will give my best for the Cardinals. But he makes no bones about the fact that he wants a playoff. He wants a ring. They all want those playoff rings.
That's why they're
Well,
playing.
He deserves it.
He may open his eyes up again if another deal with Houston doesn't come along. I don't think that's beyond the realm of possibility.
Yankees.
Do the Yankees need a guy at third base?
They do. They have a little problem there. I mean, Volpe's their shortstop. Goldschmidt has hit a home run already, so they're, it's too early to tell, but they seem to be happy with him at first base. And then Jazz Chisholm, or whatever his name
Jazz
is.
Chisholm.
Jazz Chisholm.
He's hurt, though, I think, isn't he?
No, I think he's been playing. And then DJ LeMahieu's been playing third base. And I think if you want the older Arenado more than you want the older DJ LeMahieu. I think that's that. So, I mean, they could become the East Coast Cardinals here very quickly.
The Yankees?
But I also know the Tigers are interested in Arenado too. Very much, both those teams.
Most
pushing.
teams should be interested. He had a down year last year, but his down year was still hitting approximately 270 and playing that level of defense.
And he is certainly capable of coming back and having another banner year.
And you put him in the right lineup, and he could be the key guy.
Yep.
He could be a guy that wins an MVP in the right lineup. He could be a guy that wins a world championship in the right lineup.
He'd be far from the first guy to leave St. Louis and have massive success.
Now, Terry Pendleton is a perfect example of that. Terry Pendleton seemed like a very average player when he was with the Cardinals. He got traded to the Braves. Why is Terry Pendleton a better player? He was hitting in front of David Justice and Ron Gant. That's the reason why he was a better player. Got a lot of pitches to hit, and he could hit them. Not knocking Pendleton again, but I'm just saying, if you're in the right spot in the lineup and you can deliver, you're that guy. All right, Ned, what are you going to watch on TV this afternoon?
Well, probably, if anything, I'd probably catch a little bit of the Atlanta race, but then again, that would be it. I don't really have any compelling circumstance that's going to make me watch. Furthermore, it's a good thing because I have chores to do.
What chores do you have to do?
You don't want to know them either.
Starching the underwear?
Oh, no. These are I have two pets, and they need to be taken care of.
Gonna pick the ticks out of the cats. What about you, Alec? What are you going to do?
Blues have another hockey game tonight, but try and get outside a little bit this afternoon. We've been so unfortunate with this cold weather. The snow's melting away and the roads are clearing up, so try and get some sunshine in.
Josh?
I don't know. I don't know what. I don't think I'll watch anything on TV today. I may get outside.
You're going to read, write?
I may read. I may write.
Work on his memoir.
I need to do some writing.
Yep. Well, that'd be
What
good.
about you?
Me, I'm hoping that the Yankees and the Tigers are on TV this afternoon. If not, it's a full afternoon of Hawaii 5-0 at my house.
Nice.
The old Hawaii
The original.
5-0. All right. You can download this as a podcast. Nick Fury's in the other room working on that right now. I want to say thanks to Alex Scott, Josh Roberts, of course, Ned Reynolds. We'll be back next Sunday at noon. Thanks to Brian Tyndall, Corbin Campbell, and Mike the Iron. Have a great Sunday. Ned Talk.
I mean,